Thanks for joining me in this segment of Belly Flopping into Mysticism. My name is Penny Colpin, and I'm continuing on in this series of better metaphors and analogies. Per my counting, this is segment seven, going to talk about sensitivity metaphors. But before doing so, just a reminder that I am not providing any kind of advice. I'm just sharing tools and concepts that either helped me or would have helped me when I endured a severe stress breakdown a number of years ago. And so we'll jump in. One thing I think a lot of people don't understand for someone going through this type of process is just how sensitive the nervous system can be. And that's where some of these analogies might help. The first one up is talking about radio frequencies. So I think most people still, well, a number of people still listen to the radio. You could even go with satellite. There's energy being transmitted. And I'll be honest with you, for me, that's a certain level of magic. I can't say that I understand the technical elements of that. But it goes to, there's different frequencies that if you're at that frequency, you can pick up material and then you can receive it in that sense. So there's the frequency and then there's being able to tie into that somehow. That is similar with power lines. There was one time back in '98 that I was out walking and ended up walking under some of these big, huge power lines, that are in kind of the metro areas that have the big towers. I'm not talking just a regular kind of transmission line, but has like 4 or 5, large power, the wires associated with it. And as I walked under it, my whole body, I felt something and I was like, what is that? And I looked around and then I looked up and I thought, did I just feel that energy? I remember years ago, there were cases where people, through their dental fillings, could actually get radio reception, stuff like that. So it goes to the idea of other realms of consciousness that through this, whether it's an ego collapse or through this state of sensitivity, this person can attach to, or maybe attach isn't quite the right word, but can pick up on these different levels of consciousness, different types of consciousness. Now, some of those consciousness that can be very enlightening, very positive in that sense of, believing in, the positive oneness of everything, almost a nirvana. I'm trying to think of, it's failing me now, but, kind of that really positive, favorable energy. Others can be very negative. And so there's often a bias in there that for the people who hit kind of that positive side, it's less concerning. And that's where somewhere in here, having an understanding of some of these different, what they call them, frequencies or whatever, would be helpful. Yeah, let's see. I think that pretty well covers that. One other thing I should mention, at some point I'll do a longer series on polyvagal theory, which was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. I think it's about 20 years old, but it goes to nervous system health, co-regulation. It's tied to the fight, flight, freeze. I guess fawn is another one that shows up in there. But it's nervous system health. And so these frequencies, that affects how you co-regulate with things. It also is how a person detects that something might be threatening or dangerous or what have you. So this idea of energy frequency is a decent analogy to use. In the last segment, I talked about a dog shaking off water. I'm going back to the dogs on this one. A few years ago, I was dog sitting my brother's border collie named Mabel. I shared a video of her a couple years ago. And when I was dog sitting her, there's an off-leash dog park, and then just outside that is a large park. And when we'd go outside of the dog park, well, inside the dog park, she'd always be over by the fence because she wanted to go hunt. So we'd go outside the dog park, and under 6, 8 inches, a foot of snow, she would stop. All of a sudden, head would tilt, she'd lift a paw up, head would tilt, and she would stare at a spot on the ground, that to me just looked like snow, right? And she'd cock her head the other side. And she would stare at that for like 20, 30 seconds. And then eventually she would usually pounce. Well, over the span of, I don't know, 4 months, she caught like 12 voles. and so there was something under that snow that she was able to perceive. I couldn't. I had no idea where to look. I mean, other than where she was looking. But my system was not sensitive enough to pick that up. Hers was, but mine wasn't. And I do think that in this state of ego collapse, what I've come to call a blown open nervous system, that people are much, much, much more sensitive to these energies that normally would get deflected by the existence of an ego structure. So even a dog hunting in snow, being able to perceive, or basically almost any animal like that, but being able to perceive that energy, those small, small sounds or whatever, vibrational energy, that is how sensitive a human nervous system can be with regard to some of these other non-ordinary states of consciousness. So that to me is a decent metaphor or allegory. Before pressing record, I tried to find the book. I just saw it the other day and I thought I pulled it out, and it's not where I usually have it, and it's not here, so I don't know where I laid it. But another metaphor are these cases of these 3D pictures. There are these books, and I'll try and remember to put a link in the notes so that you can pull it up and know what I'm talking about. But it's basically, usually it shows a pattern on a page. And then if you soften your eyes a little bit or soften your gaze a little bit, an object will appear to come out in 3D form. So it might be a child playing baseball or an animal or a mountain scene or something like that. And so what was flat takes on a three-dimensional image if you can modify how your eye looks at that page. Well, that goes to the idea that most people are looking at this flat page, but the person going through this can pick up another dimension or another couple of dimensions or what have you, that a number of people can't do. That doesn't make them wrong for being able to do that. Okay. So, another one that I mentioned, and again, so at some point I'm going to either invest in some software so that I can share images more easily, pictures, that type of thing. But it's the case of where you look at a picture and it can be one thing or the other, or both. That some people, when they look at it, they'll see, for example, there's a case out there where there's an image, and some people, when they first look at it, they'll see a rabbit. Other people will look at it and they'll see a duck. And then once you realize, oh, what are the ears could be the bill of a duck and vice versa, then you're able to see it both ways. Okay, so again, that thing of I've looked at it this way and only this way, and that's the right way. Well, through this type of experience with non-ordinary states of consciousness, you can often find multiple meanings with the same object that you used to only see in one way. Another case of that is another image is that of either a young woman or an old woman. Some of you guys, you might know what I'm talking about. And again, I'll look at finding a link to that and including that. Other cases of sensitivity is, how sensitive are flowers that they turn towards the sun, or they follow the sun as the sun goes through the sky during the day. They close up at night and then they open up, right? There's a level of consciousness there, and it's sensitivity to that outer environment that changes their behavior. Another analogy is that of prisms. That is where light gets reflected. This is a prism that I actually bought in Banff on March 29th, 1998. It was the morning after the crisis point where I felt the souls of my two friends. And as I looked at this, there was a glass shop, and all the sparkly and everything. And as I walked past, I thought, what's that all about? And I took a look and I noticed this mountain, which, first of all, the mountain is belongs in a different series that I hope to record at some point about symbols, right? The idea of climbing to the peak, struggling your way up to the peak. But I realized as I held this and I looked at it, that what you see depends on the angle that you look at it from. That what you see as truth depends on the angle that you look at it from. And so again, that goes to the idea that we're functioning from this ego structure that says, this is the color of the mountain. But someone else through their experience might see, this is the color of the mountain, or what have you, right? So that's another case of being sensitive to that. And through the awakening process, you can see, a person can see probably more than one angle. And when you look at something from more than one angle, I think you're more likely to see that which is true, which means that from this angle, this, from this angle, that. It's a more complex way of looking at that. And then finally, something I noted was just this case of hackles rising on the back or neck of either a person or, for example, a dog. It goes to that sensation and a natural response to it. You know, and humans, my understanding back in the day, hunters gatherers were more sensitive to when they were maybe considered prey to a wild animal. You know, that sense of some hairs standing on the back of your neck, that there's a perception there that goes beyond kind of the 5 standard senses. And in fact, there's a number of times where I love sharing my goofy synchronicity stories, as I call them. That there are times where when I'll be sharing a story and I'll kind of share the punchline or the connective part, and the person I'm speaking to will go, oh, that gave me chills. Not always, but often enough that I'm like, yeah, pay attention. That's spirit talking. You know, that spirit is going, hey, this one's for you. So again, these are some of the metaphors and analogies that can be used to describe some of the sensitivity that a person may be experiencing going through this growth process, this shedding of the ego, the shedding of the old ego in an attempt to grow something or build something more healthy, more valuable. So again, I hope there was some material of value, of interest in there. And again, if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe, like, share. You know, I hate saying that in all the videos. That's why I wait for the end. But just as a reminder. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully see you next time.